Hi, my name is Matthew Carr, and this is going to be the first of hopefully a series of videos in which I'll be making a game essentially. So, I'm one of the two members of Southeast Games. We have made a few iPhone games, made some other stuff on the side. Not a lot of stuff through Southeast Games, but I've been working with Unity for around 2-3 years, sort of full time at my day job, and also on this stuff on the side. So I thought it'd be good to make a sort of video capture of the entire development process of a game. So we're starting a new project now, and I'm going to run through everything from start to finish, at least from my side of things. So I'll be doing all the programming, creating the Unity project, and I'll go through everything essentially that is required to make this game. The game is sort of loosely defined at this point. We've come up with a bit of it, and Shane, who the other member of Southeast Games, is working on the art assets now. I'll talk about the game as the video goes on and as the series goes on. It'll start to take shape, and if anyone watches these videos, I haven't decided yet how I'll deploy them. It'd be good to get feedback throughout the process and adjust accordingly. So, might as well get into it. Starting from the beginning, I've opened up Unity 3.5, and I'm going to create a new project in this location. We don't have a name for the game at the moment, so I've just called the folder Sky Island Game. So I'm going to pick some Unity packages just for sort of placeholder content essentially. I don't want much. Might take light flares, particles, physics materials, the image effects. Again, I'm not really sure what platform we're going to get on. Obviously PC will be probable. It might also be in like an iPad, iPhone game. Could be anything at this point. We're just making a game that will hopefully exist sort of equally on any platform. Simple control system, graphical style that works on any platform, but still looks really nice. So that's sort of the goal currently. Gonna need skyboxes for now, and yeah, that's probably it. Right, I haven't looked too much into a lot of the Unity packages for a while. I don't use them typically. Character controllers I'll often use if I'm making a third-person, first-person game. Won't necessarily use them in the final product, but they are still quite good. There's no reason not to, really. I'm not really sure what's included in the scripts package, but you'll see plenty of scripts being created. So I do have a multi-monitor setup. I'm going to be recording just this monitor here. So right now on another monitor, the project is importing all those assets. Once I shift over the Unity window, everything should become visible from here onwards on this main monitor. So in the meantime, I'll talk a little bit about the game. It's going to be sort of a Angry Birds boom block, sort of fire something at a structure made up of physics-based objects and try to destroy it to reach some sort of goal. But the way we're going to go about doing the aesthetic and the design of how and what you are shooting and destroying is going to be the difference. So we're not trying to rip anything off. We're not trying to we don't do that sort of thing. We really have just come up with sort of what we think will be a fun game to make, and really actually a kind of cool art style, and something that won't take too long, but could be sort of worth the time. We've made a few things that we've been fairly happy with, but probably weren't really worth spending too much time on. A lot of things that require a lot of art assets or 2D stuff. We want to make something 3D as well, because we've been doing a lot of 2D stuff recently, and 3D is sort of what Shane's wanted to do for a while. I mean, he's primarily a 3D modeler and animator, and it's also, I prefer to work in 3D as well. So this is Unity. We have a empty scene here with just a camera, which is the default when Unity makes a new scene. So if you see here, I can toggle the sort of lights on and off. If you turn the lights off, it'll have sort of a default lighting situation. And this is the sort of skybox slash fog slash grid toggle here. So you turn that on, it basically makes it look more like what the game will look like. I prefer to turn it off while working in the scene view. My preference for lighting depends on the situation. If I have lights in the scene, then sure, I'll turn it on if I'm tweaking lighting, but a lot of the time I'll turn it off just to make it look a bit lighter. It depends on the ambient light settings you have as well. So let's get into it. So I'm going to try and quickly build a prototype over the following bunch of hours. I'm not sure how long this video or any following video will go for. And I'm also not sure about distribution methods, what websites are going to go on, how frequently, the length of the videos. I'm recording them all in 1080p, and I'll work on things like frame rate and also the compression of the final product that I deliver. As time goes on, it might not be ideal or perfect for a little while as I get through the learning curve of what's required to deliver these the best way as possible, but I'll always be recording in 1080p, and the end product will be a high definition capture of the process. So let's start creating some folders. I like to keep a good structure in my project folder. Don't really have a specific set of folder names or anything like that I like to utilize, but some of the basics I like to keep: scripts, artwork, audio. To keep the different types of files separate. In artwork, I'll often put sort of general stuff, which might be things like basic mesh as a cube or a plane, sphere, something like that. I like to have sort of a general materials folder for things just like a black material or a certain color, something like that. Things that aren't associated with a particular model. I'm going to make an FBX folder here for the actual models that come in, and I'll make a shaders folder as well, put it in the artwork. It doesn't necessarily fit with the artwork category, but I like to keep it with what it's going to be used with. So audio probably won't be touched for a while. Audio, obviously hugely important, we'll get to that, but often comes later in the process, especially with a small team. So scripts, again, I'll make a general folder. What will go where at this point I'm not sure. It's all going to become more apparent as things go on. I often like to have an object folder with just fill it with just general stuff related to objects. So I often I'll actually get straight into it now. I'm going to be coding entirely in C#, so I'll make a C# script called object startup. Now I'm working on Windows at the moment, and one of the things that happens in Unity is it has a new behavior script.cs file, which is the template it uses when it creates a new C# script, or in the same for JavaScript and so forth, or Unity script as it's actually called. Now what this means is you get this sort of default formatting, this default template. I don't like it, but I'm just going to keep it. It's just it doesn't really bother me to just quickly do that when I start up a new script. It's all totally that's just a preference thing. We like curly braces and that sort of thing. But the one issue I have with it is, as you'll see here, I'll just save that and close it, and if I reopen it, if I go back to Unity and reopen it. Oh, sorry, I have to add something. Now that I've added some new content, Visual Studio has formatted the new lines with the sort of the more standard CRLF Windows format, but obviously the templates were created on a Mac, probably in the Unity Studio, so it's kind of frustrating. I don't actually know of a way in Visual Studio 2010 to quickly have a shortcut or some option to format line endings. It can be done in other programs, and I'm sure there's some sort of extension or there is a way in Visual Studio to do it. Otherwise it will just let you know on file open if line endings are different, and you can just normalize and problem solve forever. So I might go in and modify the template file at some point, but for now I'm just going to stick with this. So the object startup script is one I typically make for reparenting. I may or may not use it on this project, but I'm just going to quickly knock it up now. My coding practices will probably be possibly inconsistent as I go. Obviously I'm trying to get things done a little bit quickly at the first, just to get a prototype running, get something visual happening. So maybe less comments now, more comments later, or I just sort of go with what I feel is necessary. I often comment when I feel the code is going to be unreadable to me. I mean, I'm the only one going to be using this code. Obviously you guys will be looking at me type and watching me code this stuff and want to know what's going on if I don't explain it, and I'll try to write comments where possible. I'm not sure at this stage what I'll do with the final product, if I'll release it or not. Obviously anyone following along can just frame by frame go through and type what I type, and that's cool. I don't really care. I mean, at the end of the day I'll still be finished first, so whatever. Now I've finished the script for reparenting, as I probably said. So what I'm going to do is make a variable here, public transform, parent2. I always like to initialize my variables, even though Unity will initialize or give them a value in the inspector when they show up. So it will set this to null, but I prefer to do it this way anyway. So basically, for now we'll just make one that is just going to do the reparenting, and let's just go transform parent equals parent2, and then let's actually destroy this script. So what this will do is it will grab the transform that this script is on, so every object in Unity, so its main camera object. I'm not going to talk too much about Unity, but I'll probably talk about everything at some point. So just quickly, Unity has a game object and component system, so you can create a new game object. It's an empty object except for the transform component. Every game object has a transform component which holds the data about its position and rotation in space. So as I move this around, you'll see the position changing, and I can rotate it. So rotating it on its y-axis, and you can see its y value up here in the transform changing. So I can add components to that. So again, this game object. Let's go add a mesh filter, mesh renderer. So the mesh filter stores information about a particular mesh, and then the mesh renderer holds information about how to render the mesh in the mesh filter. And you see here I can actually create a mesh filter without a mesh renderer, but I can't create totally false. I don't know if that was in a previous version of Unity or if I just made that up. Some components have required components, so a mesh renderer might require a mesh filter. In this case, not true, but let's just pretend it was, and that didn't just happen. So we're going to drop a cube mesh in here. These are the default meshes sort of built into Unity. They're not in the project at all. I'm not a massive fan of these meshes. Like, the plane is 10 by 10 meters, and I'm not really a big fan of it. It's sort of normal being on the y-axis I mean, it is what it is. It's good for chucking in a ground plane, and I guess that makes sense if that's what it's for. I'm not, and the UV mapping on some of these isn't fantastic, so I don't typically use them too much. I can hit the F key to focus or frame select an object, and I believe there's also middle click in 3.5 will let you do this sort of thing. I'm fairly new to 3.5. 3.5 is fairly new, so I might be discovering some new things and looking at some of its new features. Navigation might come into play in this project, so there's new pathfinding features and that sort of thing. So we also just drop a material on it. Okay, so you see here I've made a new object and I've given it a mesh renderer and mesh filter component. Mesh filter stores information about the cube mesh, so it knows all about the different vertices and normals and tangents and so forth of that cube, the UV mapping of it, and then the mesh renderer takes in information for the rendering system, and these are the materials I want to apply. So I'm applying a via add material. I can actually put two materials on it and we'll just put them over the same spot. It's only got one sub mesh on it, so if there were multiple sub meshes, then you have different material IDs for each one, and the second material would go to a certain sub mesh. So what this has done is just let me put multiple meshes on the same, multiple materials on the same mesh here. So I'm going to put a snowflake and a fire add, and now we have a very stupid looking cube. So we'll delete that. Go back to our main camera. So you can see here it's just a game object with a camera component, and these components related to the first GUI layer and flare layer. These sort of the GUI elements that Unity has built into render on this camera, and same with flares. And then the audio listener is probably not always something you want to include on the camera itself. Depends on sort of what you're doing. If you want to do something tricky or shift it around, you can only have one audio listener in a scene at a time, so if you're swapping cameras around, you often want to detach that or make a system for turning some on and off as you swap cameras around. Basically, this object now, this camera's transform, is the position of, I guess what you could say is the ear in the scene. So any audio source, which for example, I can make a game object and throw on an audio source. If I put an audio clip on here and told it to play an awakened loop, it would just play audio within a certain range. I can change the minimum distance here. That's not exactly what you think it is necessarily. This is more, you can see here, if I grab there we go. Okay, now it's working for me. You can see this bar here represents the distance of the listener from the audio source, and it sort of shows what the volume will be at that distance. So when I'm right up on it, I'm going to get the full 100% volume, and as I move away, here at 100 meters away, or 100 units, it's getting close to 0%. But audio is not really our concern. Just another thing here, I can click the padlock here to keep the inspector open for the object I had selected when I locked it. So I didn't actually need to select it then, but anyway, delete that. Again, back to our camera. Now, object startup script. If I were to make a game object called desired parent and throw that onto the camera, I can play, you'll see that the camera was parented to desired parent, and the component deleted itself because it had fulfilled its purpose. I wasn't going to use it again. And that just keeps it out of the way. And I find that to be a pretty clean way of just, especially if art assets come in a way that's not quite right, and you sort of want to, or you want to keep the integrity of an art asset. It's good to not modify the hierarchy of an FBX that comes in, because it makes it more difficult to modify or update as the artists improve on the asset or add things to it. If you've modified the hierarchy, then lose all that information. You have to sort of write some very complicated update tools to sort of get the latest asset in. The way Unity sort of serializes references to things in the hierarchy is via index. Not really important for now. I might actually at some point have the issue that I'm referring to, or be able to demonstrate it in a visual way. It's sort of difficult to describe necessarily what the problem is. So I feel it's very, very important to not modify the hierarchy of an FBX, an asset brought in. Instead, if you want to put something on a particular point in the hierarchy, I believe you should make a parent for it, put the FBX underneath that parent, make any sort of additions you want as another sub-object under that parent, and use scripts to sort of reparent them or add them to things, or whatever you need to do. But that's just a preference of mine in working with sort of large projects and lots of assets. Okay, so we're going to get into this right now. Let's go to render settings and put on a skybox. Sunny 2 is a classic. You can see here. Also what I'm going to do is jump into the player settings and change it to linear lighting. I feel like we're using 3.5 and presumably building for PC initially, so we might as well look at using cool linear lighting stuff straight up. So we'll have a look at the difference between linear and gamma lighting later. So actually I've got, let me just, if you're using Unity, you'll probably want to quickly open up the scripting reference quite often. It's invaluable for quickly looking up what a method's going to do, or how to do what you need to do. So I'm just going to open up all three of these, and we might just take a quick look around at some point. So I could have a look here at the new linear lighting stuff in 3.5, and I think we'll see here that it supported platforms. So it only works on Windows and Mac, 360 and PS3. So if we do build for the iPad, it's not going to work on that. But that's sort of multi-platform. It's going to look different on one platform to another. I feel it's good to keep, obviously the art assets, good to keep them the same. But if you can, do high resolutions, high res textures, and sort of nicer effects on a certain platform, I don't see why not. So that's sort of the plan at the moment. Let's really get into it now. Let's start doing stuff. So Shane has actually built a asset for us to use. I'm just going to bring this up now. Just bear with me for just a moment. Alright, so I just grabbed an FBX from a folder, and I'm dropping that into the project. There's also some textures which I'll drop into here as well. Now what I'm going to do is just make a new folder for the rock platform. Naming conventions for folders, not a big deal. I prefer not to use spaces in anything, although depending on what you're doing, it's not necessarily a big deal. Okay, so you can see here the rock platform's in. It's got what possibly appears to be textures, but let's have a look. Let's drop it in. Okay, we can see that it's actually not textures. What it's done is it's grabbed the material colors from from 3D Studio Max, and because I didn't have the textures in there at the time, it hasn't applied them. So what I'm going to do is re-import. Nope. Okay, so the materials on here, might be a 3.5 thing, or might just be how it was exported. Material naming by base texture name. So the texture names are the same as the actual texture names, but we're not seeing textures automatically applied to this asset. So what we're going to have to do is just open up the grass. Okay, so when you're modifying a material, you have the properties of the shader, and you can modify which shader it's using. So let's jump in here and modify both at the same time. We'll do the rock first. Okay, we're just going to use. Okay, so Shane's built. I'm gonna quick unwrap of this rocky structure here, and pumped out these textures here. So we've got a diffuse and a spec map. Unity doesn't have any shaders for separate spec maps, so we're going to have to do something about that shortly. So for now, I'll just make a spec shader, chuck that on there. You can see that looks totally awesome. What I typically like to do is just wipe the color that comes in, because typically the color from Max doesn't really correspond to what the artist actually wants the color to be. It often comes in with a grey color, and I think 9 times out of 10 you'll find that the desired result is white. White meaning, you know, just full texture color, because that's why the texture was made that color. You know, it's not really rocket science. It's just something that people don't think about or don't pick up on, that the materials come in with that color, depending on the where it's exported from and the settings in that. Okay, so that's a crazy spec value at the moment, but it's not a big deal. Our scene is not set up for any sort of a particular lighting situation. Turn lights on and off. Our ambient light setting is down low. That's showing the ambient light color value there. With the grass shader, we'll just do the same. Specular for now. Throw on the grass texture and put it to white. So you can sort of see what the basic intention is here for perhaps the art style. Stylized, sort of this surreal sort of rock structure. Very bright grass. It's going to look really nice, I think. And this is obviously, don't know much about the game yet, and the other assets going to be involved, but we'll get to that. I think that actually looks pretty cool. So another thing I like to do is, I don't always necessarily need to put this stuff in the resources folder, but the good thing about the resources folder is you can instantiate these things at runtime via their name. So even if they're not included in the scene, they still get included in the project, which means if I have some external scripts trying to trigger things or fire things off in the game and create objects, they can do so if they're in the resources folder. Those assets are included in the build. So let's make a folder in here for game prefabs, and in here we'll store the prefabs to be used in the game. We might have other prefabs that are more scripts or manager game objects that we just want to make a prefab for. The layout I typically use for Unity sort of depends on how many monitors I'm using. I'm going to stick with one monitor at this 1080p res for I guess, the duration of this development. So I'm just going to stick with this layout for now and see if I have any issues. Now I'm sort of a stickler for the way I develop prefabs. I sort of always make them. Actually, it's more about my modification of prefabs that I guess you'll see as I go on. That I do it in a very particular way. I don't modify ones in the scene. I always bring in a new one, have it all set to 0, modify that one only, and have the ones in the scene always connected to the prefab so that they update accordingly. And I'll talk about more about things like, you know, prefab override properties and things like that later on. So my rock platform, always make a parent. After that, we're just going to make a misspelled graphics node. It's zeroed out, which is perfect. I'm going to throw in the rock platform FBX. It has some values on it, and that is essentially 0. Has a negative 9-degree rotation. It's a Y rotation, which it was exported with, which I prefer, you know, things to be completely zeroed out on export. So we'll probably get that re-exported at some point anyway, and get that fixed up. So its pivot is on the top of it, which is perfect for what we want. Having it down the bottom here and it's an arbitrary size, not very useful. This is the part we care about. This is the part we want to position. So that's spot on. I can position this platform here at 0 and position things to go on the platform with the pivots on the bottom at 0, and it will all just be nice and lined up. I think will sit on that flush. Okay, so our rock platform prefab has the rock platform under the graphics node, and that's essentially it for now. We're going to just be happy with that. So I'm going to drop that prefab right there. Might not need this folder structure. I'll consider that later as I add more prefabs. Having a, you know, there might not be anything under this folder, so I'll probably, you know, rename this to something like, you know, environment prefabs, and we'll just see about that. Make one for characters. Okay. So we might as well use this scene as our scene. We've already got the skybox good to go. So let's throw in our rock platform prefab. Throw it at 0. What I actually want is maybe a few more of these. So the idea is that the gameplay will exist on these rock platform sort of islands in the sky. I'm actually going to just build a few of these and shift them around 50 meters each way. I'm going to build 4 more and send them out in the positive X, negative X, and positive Y, negative, oh, it's already positive Z, negative Z direction. So what I can do is set up these snap settings so that when I move with control, this is, I'm going to talk about Windows keys as well. You'll have to check for the corresponding keys on a Mac keyboard. So as I hold down control, it'll snap 50 meters. I'll probably say meters a lot instead of units. I mean, they are essentially meter units in Unity. So snap 50 meters in the X and Z plane. So I've got this second platform here. I'm going to hold down control, click on the Z axis, and move my mouse that direction. And that can't be 50 meters, can it? Okay, see, what I've just realized is that it's totally 50 meters. And another aspect of FBX imports, scale factor very much typically set to 0.01. And there's ways around this. You can write post import scripts or pre-import scripts to modify the scale factor as it comes in, but then if you have things from Maya and things from Max, you get issues with Maya's scale being right at one factor and Max's being right at another. It doesn't really bother me to just modify it as it comes in, like so. And while I'm here, I generally like to just turn off animation importing for assets at the end of animations. You can write a script to do that as well, which is probably the way to go. And yeah, that's fine. So I'll apply that. Alright, now we have a gigantic platform. So we're going to have to look into what the units are that Shane's used in building this, because that's, well, okay, let's think about it in real world size. What we're planning on doing on these platforms is having siege weapons, essentially. So you'll have a catapult, trebuchet, something like that on a platform, and it will fire across to another platform. So I'm not sure how big trebuchets are. Let's say 20 meters. If it's a massive one, that seems like a thing that could be true. I'm not a trebuchet expert. The easiest way to do this would be zero that out. Okay, so alright. Fair enough. I still think it's too big. Let's just see if we can modify maybe globally the platforms to be. Yeah, that's too small. So, alright, let's get back to a scale factor of 1. And what I'm going to do is, there's going to be different sized platforms in the game, and we might get more art assets made to suit that desire. What I'm going to do for now is just duplicate this a couple of times. Rock platform large, medium, and rock platform small. So these are all large rock platforms, and I think that's fair enough. Let's drop in these two, and let's go to the graphics node, and let's just drop this down to yeah, about half of that, which I think is good. Well, let's go about 0.7. Alright, and then the small one can be we'll try half, or maybe a little bit smaller. I think it's good to keep a uniform scale. If you want to chuck something into a shader and utilize the vertex position values in some sort of shader calculation, non-uniform scales will mess you up. But I mean, obviously something like this is not a big deal. It's not going to be used in that fashion. Okay, so just thought of another thing we're going to need on these platforms. We're going to need collision. Ideally, you'd build some optimized collision geometry, and that's what we will do eventually. For now, we don't have it. I'm just going to chuck on a mesh collider. Mesh colliders will use the current mesh that's in a mesh filter on the game object, and you see if I just move this out of the way, turn off the mesh filter, you'll see collision geometry the same as the mesh geometry. So not really ideal. We don't really care about all of this. What we mainly care about is this, and some sort of shell here. So what I might be able to do is use Unity's convex. That's probably pretty much perfect. Alright, we're going to stick with that for now. So that's cool. So Unity provides a little checkbox here for creating a convex sort of hull of the mesh geometry for your collision. Pretty much exactly for the purpose we just used it for. So that's sweet as. I'm going to just do that, reset the position, keep the negative Y rotation, that's fine. And let's just do the same with these. They have animation components which we don't want or need. I'm going to remove those. And actually, another thing about Unity 3.5 is, I haven't used it a lot, but apparently you can edit multiple things at a time. So let's just have a go at adding a mesh collider to 2 things. That totally works. Alright, sweet. So convex, and that's done on both. Right, so I'm going to apply the change to that prefab, and that prefab. Select them and delete. Now you see this one in the scene because it was still connected to this prefab. It has now been updated with the collision geometry and so forth. The lack of animation component. So that's zeroed out. That's right in the center of the world. That's where our target is going to be in the game. So we're going to build little fortresses, little structures on here, and shoot at them from islands surrounding it with ballistas, trebuchets, catapults, cannons, whatever we come up with, whatever works, whatever looks cool and you know, fits the gameplay. We're sort of thinking a sort of a bit of a silly style here. So actually thinking this is in the sky because dwarves who had mined, you know, gold had their sort of their gold stolen by leprechauns who have ridden rainbows up to their island fortresses in the sky. They're sort of these floating islands, and thinking the dwarves wouldn't be able to follow, but you know, whatever the story conceit is, probably that the dwarves you know, built siege weapons, built trebuchets and shot themselves into the air or something like that, and now they're up here to get their gold back. So sort of dwarves good, leprechauns bad, dwarves versus leprechauns. Yeah, don't steal the idea before we release the game. Not that you would want to. Alright, so we're going to delete that. I'm going to drop in a new medium one. We're just going to use medium ones for now. So I'll just think about our snap settings again. Alright, so if this is, seems to be what, about 100? Yeah, so okay, so we made it about 100 meters, so it's a nice big sort of football field sized platform. So with that in mind, let's maybe look at 200 meter snap. I think that's a pretty good distance. We'll figure it out exactly later on, but yeah, I think in camera angle here you still want to be able to see platforms around. Yeah, okay, so that's good. So where's that at? That's at 278. Let's make it an even 280, and we'll set up our snap settings accordingly. Alright, let's throw in another medium platform. Slot that there. Throw another one. Let's dupe that while we're here. Do that, and delete this cube. Okay, so we have a bunch of islands in the sky. This is totally the sky right now. Now it's more like the sky. Very dark looking sky. Let's just quickly jump in, change our ambient light settings, just lighten it up. Okay, let's drop in a directional light. Directional light's a bit awkward sometimes. Just positioning them is frustrating because you don't want them to be in the way, but sometimes you actually want to use them for things like sun flares, you know, any sort of post effects or something like that, or if you have custom shadow calculations or lighting stuff going on, the position can become important. Directional lights don't actually, their position inherently is not important in sort of the function of the light, but you will get a little gizmo. You can probably actually just turn it off by turning off light gizmos, but then you'll lose it for all lights. So what I'll do is just put it in the center, and as I typically do, I'm going to put it straight up. Since this light is already on an angle, which Unity have obviously done, I guess in maybe 3.5, I don't remember seeing it before, defaulting it to a certain angle. You can see now I can't move it directly up. All its axes are based on its local space rotation. I'm going to reset it back to 0, and I'm going to use this button up here to switch from local coordinates to world coordinates or global coordinates, and you'll see now that the y-axis points in the world's y. So that's cool. I'm just going to shove it up there somewhere. Let's just make it 1000y. Alright, so that's cool. Alright, so that looks nice. Bright green. Not off-putting at all. I think so. What's going to happen is going to be wooden platforms on here, little guys running around. Not entirely sure what the leprechaun fortresses and structures will look like. They'll obviously be made up of some sort of physics-based blocks. So you can see here we'll just jump on a cube. Right, let's make some 10-meter block cubes. Yeah, see the cube's pivot is in the center, which is fine for the graphics, but let's jump in here and make a fortress. And having the words dwarf and fortress in the game might be a bit strange, so we might look at not putting that in the game or naming it something else, or people can get over the fact that there's something in the game with similar words to other games. Okay, so let's make a wood block. Okay, it's actually going to have a whole bunch of blocks. Let's actually, I prefer to keep names, use a naming convention that so that listed in alphabetical order or things of like types will be listed together. So if I call it block wood and then block stone, etc., they'll all be listed, say, in the project window together. Alright, so game prefabs is totally a game prefab. Let's make a new folder, call it blocks. Now our block wood is going to need graphics. So I'll probably follow this convention throughout the production. So the graphics node here will have the cube for now as a placeholder. I'll just reset that. I want to set the scale to 10 again, and I want to move this up 5 meters so that the block's pivot is on the bottom. Now the cube has a box collider by default, which is fine. We might look at doing a whole bunch of physics material stuff later on. For now, I'll just leave it at the default. Let's see if we've got any. We really don't. If I had imported maybe terrain assets, I would have got some sort of dirt or rock textures, that sort of thing. So let's just make some placeholder material stuff now. Let's make a brown. That's an awesome brown. Super happy with that brown. Drop that brown on nothing apparently. Drop that brown on something. And let's hope that we didn't drop the brown on something I haven't noticed yet. Okay, there's nothing in there to drop a brown onto. I'm going to stop saying drop a brown because it's a bit weird. Alright, my block is zeroed out, so that's perfect candidate for prefabbage. Alright. That is a good looking brown block. Alright, so let's make a few more of these. before I get too far into it, actually let's delete that, go into our block and consider the things that we've forgotten. We need physics, rigid body. Now a rigid body component will utilize the colliders on any children, so that's fine to throw it on the parent here. We shouldn't need continuous collision detection on anything in this game. I don't think anything's going to go too fast, it'll be too small. We'll obviously modify the settings later, but let's actually have a look right now and see. I actually might just, while I'm here, make a scenes folder and save this as let's make it level 1. With the intention of this actually being eventually the first level of the game. How I go about constructing the levels, I don't want to necessarily go in here and place cubes by hand one by one, and I'm not saying I won't, it probably will be how it ends up, but I might come up with some sort of tool or something to do it differently, or also in the way the platforms are placed. There's going to be different sort of platforms, there's going to be different things. I'm expecting them to, at some point move up and down for difficulty, things like that. So I've added a couple of zeros here preceding the 1 with the intention of there being, at least, maybe a maximum of 999. If there's more than that, then it probably means I've sold 1 million copies and just pumping out levels to make money. Okay, so let's have a look at how this goes if I do that. Let's quickly grab our camera as well. Camera's in a crappy position right now, let's just drop it behind. Okay, so I do not know exactly what people know, sort of how their Unity knowledge extends through all this sort of stuff. Typically, I've picked up a lot of stuff over the years and I sort of forget what is and isn't apparent. So as I go, I'll just be talking about what I'm doing just in case it is a good tidbit or not. So like in this case, and I've just chosen this one because it's pointing down positive Z just because I like that fact for no reason. Game object menu has align with view. Apparently Control Shift F, and I've used the shortcuts for these. I don't use them often enough, but align with view takes the selected game object, in this case the main camera, and positions and aligns it with your current camera view. So you also have move to view, which doesn't change the rotation, and you can also click on something and say align view to selected. So these are really pretty kick-ass tools. My camera is now completely retarded, and sorry for using that word. Let me just align view to selected. Okay, so now I've got no roll on my camera, so that's a lot better. So I'm going to hit Control P to play. Very slow moving cube. Okay, so we've got to remember that this is perhaps that cube was pretty slow, wasn't it? So there's a few things we could do. We could jump into our physics settings and modify things like the gravity speed. Negative 9.81 is sort of the standard speed, negative 9.81 meters per second. That's cool. That's a good velocity. I'm going to leave that and instead probably modify the things like the mass of the thing, and angular drag shouldn't be doing too much right now. Changing the mass is initially going to make it fall faster, as we know. So these are things to tweak later on. It might require physics, gravity changes, or material changes, and all these sort of things to make it work how we want. But for now, that's super cool. Stuff falls down when I hit play. That's always what we want. So I'm going to figure out why that's doing that. I must have been hitting a button I didn't want to hit. Okay. Hitting Control D to duplicate these. Moving them just an arbitrary amount. I don't really care about it looking pretty right now. Alright, so we have a little bunch of them. Jeep those. Jeep that again. Alright, grab that and shift it over a bit. Keep it, raise it up, raise another lot up, and another lot. Make a nice big target for us to hit. Alright, now that I think about it, I probably don't want all these ones in the middle necessarily, so I'm going to start deleting some of these. And let's grab these and juke them and shove them over. Alright. So theoretically that should stand. Save that, Control P, and then I'll just settle. I can jump into the scene view while it's playing and just observe. Hold down the Alt key, left click to rotate around whatever is frame selected, which in this case is that cube. Alright. When working with hierarchies of stuff like this, you know, if I wanted to view, expand all this stuff, I can hold down Alt and left click an arrow, collapse it all, Alt, left click the arrow. Tidbit. Daily tidbit. Okay. So, it's looking quite cool. Obviously the spec is all crazy on these rocks. Why don't we do something about that? Now, as I said, Unity doesn't have any shaders for spec map, stuff like that. Their spec map, as you can see on the description of their property here, their main texture, the RGB, red, green, blue channels are for the diffuse, and the alpha channel they use for gloss to modify the specular values. What I have, and this is not an advertisement for my other stuff, but I do have a shader package available that has a few spec map shader variations. I'm just loading that up now on a separate monitor. I'm going to just drop that shader in to my shaders folder. So if I can figure out where I'm looking. Alright. Okay, let's grab this CG include file, which probably isn't needed for spec map shaders, but I'll just leave it there just in case. And I'll grab a spec map shader. So the benefits of having the spec map stuff in a separate texture is for, you know, if you want to have transparency with spec maps, or if you want to do colored spec maps, which is what this shader should allow. So I go into Advanced SS, standing for Advanced Surface Shaders. I know the acronym is what it is. I knew that before I published it. Didn't care, because I'm cool. Alright, so I'm going to drop that spec map on there, and now you can see all of a sudden we don't have crazy spec, but we're not really seeing much spec at all. So because these the spec map's not really going to white very much, so what we can do now is jump in here and start modifying the specular value. So I'm going to put that all the way up to, I'm going to make it, it's a good colour, green. Now we have green in our spec. Are we seeing much spec at all? Hard to tell. Point light. Alright, not seeing much there. Not a great advertisement for my spec map shader, if that is indeed what is not working. Not really seeing anything there, are we? Let's jump into the shader and have a look. I don't want to get too much into shader code, and this is obviously, you know, something you can buy on the store. Why would you want to do that? I don't know. Actually, I've updated this since this version, and yeah, there's a few things here. You don't need a view direction, we don't care about view direction. It's not the you know, formatting. These are things that you know, I just don't really like Unity's default formatting in any of their files. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. You know, I totally couldn't care less for the most part, but it just doesn't go with how I like to do things or have Visual Studio set up and that sort of thing. So let's see what's happening here. Why would the spec not be coming in? Alright, so this is where the properties are set up. You can see the spec map there. I'm only using UVs for the main texture. That shouldn't be a problem. Grabbing the spec map down here. Okay, so this is actually, this might be the problem. I've started 3.5. I think it's possible it's going to do things a little bit differently. Okay, hopefully not though. I've totally got these working in 3.5 and haven't had an issue. I don't use this shader specifically in my test scene, so I may not have picked up if there's a problem on this one, or perhaps I'm just doing something wrong, which would be pretty awesome too. Alright, so let's just have a look. So we're grabbing the color from the spec map. Some water. Okay, so the easiest thing to do, I find when testing out spec map stuff, is just to take out the diffuse. Not just spec map stuff, but just anything in a shader. If you're just trying to look at a particular aspect of it, just look at that aspect of it. You know, don't look at anything else. So we're not seeing any spec whatsoever on that. So let's figure out why. Gloss is being set to the luminance of the spec map color. Let's set that to 1 and see if that's where our issue lies. Okay, now we're starting to see something. Alright. Yeah. So a specular colour is coming in. I wonder if the spec map was black, then the spec colour would be getting multiplied by 0 and would come in with nothing. Let's see what if we take out the multiplication. It should get a little bit brighter, a lot brighter, but you see the spec map was working, it was reading it right, it was only showing around the edges. So I think the issue is that luminance is a function. Let's delete this line. That possibly requires the Unity cg.cg inc file. No, totally not. So let's see. Yep. Okay. So it's definitely a problem with the luminance method and the texture detail we're passing in. I wonder. So let's have a look. If we just grab the albedo, populate that with spec map color. Alright, so that looks like the spec map is alright, UV is all perfect, comes in good. You see a lot of compression here as well, and we'll talk about that later. If I jumped in here and changed that to true colour, and that obviously looks a lot nicer. And we'll work on that at some point, figure out how to deal with it, and what the best solutions are. We'll talk about that and go through that at a later date. Alright, so luminance seems to be our issue. So let's now bring up actually we come over here and just quickly see. Alright, so in the Unity directory editor data CG includes, you'll find CG Inc. And what I want to do is drop that into Visual Studio and have a look at it. Alright, so what I'm looking for is luminance. And here it is. So it returns a fixed value, so it takes a fixed 3. There's a dot product of that colour with this value here. Interesting. So let's just check that there's nothing wrong in our call to luminance. Pink means problem. Line 35. Dot product fixed 3 using a bracket, parentheses. Alright, so it's compiling that shader. Go back to our scene view. Alright, so it's just, there is, okay, when before we thought it wasn't working, it was working. It's just that the overall luminance value of that texture is very, very low. So one of the shaders, I don't believe I've made it yet. It was, yeah, I don't see it. Yeah, one of the shaders I was going to make, and I talked about this on the forum, is to allow spec map shaders that took that probably didn't use a color spec map, but used one of the channels for, so this what's typically called as shining, this value here, and one for the gloss. So instead of using the luminance value, there would be a separate channel to read for that value. See, I don't really think that's got enough punch to it. When modifying materials, you can often, you can do this. You can select the mesh or the object with the renderer on it that has the material and modify it there, but you'll get all these wireframes and things like that. I find it's often better just to click on the material directly and modify it. So if we drop down shininess, it pretty much does what we need. You can pump that up, and yeah, now we're getting pretty much what we're after. So okay, there was no problem with the shader, but you probably still want to maybe add in another value to it in this case, or modify the texture some, or use the shader that I referred to, and maybe I'll write that shader as part of this project, and you'll see a bit more about shader development. So I'll just jump in here for now and just undo that. Double check that the luminance call still works fine. while I'm doing that, we've done that, and it's interesting. That's what did we just undo? We didn't want to do. Drop that back in there. Okay. So we can see that that is actually working there. It's kind of hard to see, it is very faint. I'm just going to drop in something in here. So let's make a new this is probably fairly temporary. So we got a gloss multiplier, and we'll give it a range of 0 to 5, default 1, and just make it do something. Just pump that up. Yeah, 5. Let's go all the way. So multiply that by 5, and you can see now we actually have a light source. Change this to blue, and we can see the speck in blue, and it's fairly subtle, and that is probably what we want for this rock. And and we'll talk to Shane and see what his intention is for this sort of stuff. You'll see that the compression on this texture is also pretty crappy. So and again, the unwrapping is probably not helping. So as that improves and changes, it'll look better. So that's more how it should look. Put it back to compressed, and it doesn't look very good at all. So I'll actually just leave it on true color for the moment, and we can look at that as an issue later on. Okay, so that's sorted. Put this specularity back to white color, and yeah, I think that's fine for the moment. Alright, I'll quickly just go back in here and show what I did. Added a new property, made it a range type. I could have also made it a float. I typically don't like using ranges for some stuff because it does limit the range essentially, which is its intention, between 0 and 5, but if I wanted to go to 10 I couldn't, and that's a bit of a problem. I could instead have just gone float, and I wouldn't have had this cool slider in there to modify, but I could have set it to any value. I've dropped it in here so that the shader will pick up on that property and allow me to use it in the surface shader pixel shader here. I've just multiplied the luminance value by the gloss multiplier in the gloss output for that. So that's the gist of that. We'll probably get into shader stuff more later on if required. I'm not going to go into things that I don't really need to do for the project, but I'll probably touch on quite a lot. So I kind of like the look of this. Just these assets, actually you can see through there, which is probably not ideal. But we won't see it from this angle too much. And again, these are it's still early days. Yeah, the colours here, just the way that looks against the blue. I'm really digging that, and I think I also dig the bright green. Okay, so let's just play again, and all right, I'm going to switch over to deferred rendering as well for now for this project. Deferred lighting. Mainly just so we get ugly aliasing. Just as I explore sort of what image effects we might want to use and things like that. I'll deferred sort of allows me a bit more. I might switch back. It's going to be multi-platform. Forward rendering is often the way to go, and also have to deal with this color space issue. I mean, you can see, I'm not actually sure. And again, okay, so here's also a big thing. This is probably why we're having a hard time seeing what was going on in the shader, and why I hadn't seen that issue before. The gloss was not showing up much. The specular was not showing up much in the linear color space, and that's actually quite strange. I don't know if that's really ideal. Actually, that's quite a massive difference in the output there, isn't it? Obviously, that looks wildly different. I'm not sure if there's a issue in just hot swapping around. If I play it, how does it look? The same, very radioactive. So that's actually quite curious. Again, 3.5 is new. I'm new to 3.5. I'm actually gonna have to look into that and see what's going on. But for now, let's just stick with what looks nice, and I'm sure we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Might switch back to forward for now, actually, and throw on some better quality stuff. So 3.5, thank God they've allowed modifiable quality settings. I'm just going to go straight in here and just delete. I don't want any more than 3 quality settings for now. Even if I target multiple platforms, I don't think there's going to be 3 different settings. I'll probably rename them to, one's a PC and then an iPhone, iPad, and Android stuff. Whatever it needs to be. For now, I'm just going to use Fantastic. I'm going to default to Fantastic. And all these current platforms that are here. Yeah, I mean, I'm still not entirely sure on their quality setting stuff for different platforms and how it's all working. I haven't done multi-platform stuff really too much, so I'm actually going to be learning some of that as I go as well. I think I'll put 4 times AA on, and shadow distance. Let's think about shadow distance. If we're going to be here, and we're going to be probably up here. I might just try something a little bit tricky. And in fact, I might even do something. Wow, that totally didn't. I want to align with you. Okay, let's move to view, not move with, or move to view, meaning put it in front of me. Fair enough. Okay, totally different to align with you. So what I said earlier was not necessarily right for that option. So I'm actually interested in creating a tool for measuring space in Unity. I would do it now. I would write it now to demonstrate creating editor scripts, which I've made dozens and dozens. But it might take a little while, because what I want to do probably is measuring this point from this cube. Anywhere in this cube for this distance is fine. I don't really care what part of the cube I go from. Center, that's cool. But picking the point down here I want to measure to is a bit different. In this case, pivot would work fine too, but probably picking a vertex would be better, or just raycasting to anywhere on here. What I might do for now is Alright, let's just do the basic one. Alright, let's quickly jump in here and make an editor window. This is all taking a bit of a detour here, but I'm just going to go with the flow and do what I feel I want to do at any particular time. And what I'm going to do now is create a folder in my scripts folder called editor, which will house my editor scripts. So this is going to be called the space rule space measure. Alright, now just to get up and running quickly, because I don't necessarily know off the top of my head, I typically just copy and paste existing editor scripts when making new ones just to get up and running. I'm just going to open up one of my scripts on another. Okay, let's just use the Unity reference because that's what it's here for. And most people don't have existing scripts if they're going to be doing this for the first time. So what I've done is gone to the reference manual, and I just did a search for editor. Extending the editor is what I want to look at. Here's an example of an editor window, a timeline pane. This is from ancient days of Unity. Okay, most of their examples are in JavaScript, which, you know, whatever. Say menu item, static show window, functional. That's basically what I want. I just want that. Jump in here. Okay, for C#, typically we'll do something like that. Make this call this custom, and call this space measure. Okay, static void show window, editor window, get window, my window. My window being, I would assume, the class name. My window. Okay, see how that goes. And then an on GUI method. Say void on GUI. Do a quick test here. GUI layout will allow me to create a label that is automatically formatted. Alright, let's see what is wrong here. Alright, so that's obviously requires a type. Let's just double check that. System.type. So that is not a type. We need to use type of method. C# static method here, which you can pass in. It's a class, and it will give you back a type. Alright, so that's fine. Unity also pops up the warning about inconsistent line endings, which is where the desire to get rid of them comes from. Close that, double click that, hit that, problem solved. No more warnings, no more errors. Click up here, get our new custom space measure. Drag it over here. Okay, so these are all dockable. I don't want to dock this, but I will. Right, say space measure, test label, totally works. Okay, so what we're going to do is create a private variable to house the transform. What are we going to call this? Transform point. Well, transform 1 totally works, and transform 2. So these are going to be the variables that house the two transforms we're going to be measuring between. And for now, I'm just going to do an object editor GUI layout dot object field. Totally didn't type that in any way that resembled correct. And I'll pass in the current value. I want a transform, and that's that's it, but I believe one of the overloaded. Yep. So transform 1. I want to set the resulting. So what this does is it renders an object field with this object in it of type transform, using Unity's object field thing. So it'll give the little select button, so it'll pop up all the transforms in the scene, let me pick from them. I can drag a transform into it, and when I do that, it returns the new object or the current object if unchanged, and it returns a type of Unity object is actually deprecated. Why is that deprecated? Oh yes, okay, because we need to give it allow scene objects. So I totally want to allow scene objects. No longer deprecated. Okay. So what happens is it returns, if I don't put anything in there, it returns transform 1 as a object or Unity engine.object type, which is not the type that we're assigning it to, so we need to cast it by this method. You could also cast it like this. I typically prefer that as a transform, so we can assign it back to transform 1. So we want to do the same for transform 2. Okay. So transform 1, transform 2 have their own little object fields with these labels. Transform 1, transform 2. And what I'm going to do is, this isn't going to be the most super optimized window. Hell, let's make it optimized. So I want to store the distance between transforms. Now, if transform 1, well, what we need to know is the previous transform 1 equals transform 1, previous transform 2 equals transform 2. Whoop. Okay, so what we can do now is check if, first we're going to check if transform 1 equals null or transform 2 equals null. Now this is one way of writing it. I kind of prefer this way often because it's just more explicit. You can also say if transform, and this is sort of a comparison, sort of implicitly saying, is this transform null or not? I sort of prefer this explicit way. Now, if it's null or the other one's null, meaning we can't measure the space between them because one of them or both of them don't exist, I'm going to just return here and log out GUI layout dot label. Transforms need to be assigned to both transform fields for measurement. So returning here means that it will end this method at this point. So I can continue writing code that won't occur if one of these is null. So at this point we can safely assume that neither is null. So I can test if previous transform 1 is not equal to transform 1, or previous transform 2 is not equal to transform 2. I often put spaces here. I've got it set up so it totally removes that. You're probably just wondering why I'm doing it. It's just trying to change habits. Okay, I'm going to make a separate method here for measure. Well, get distance between transforms. And this would probably be better set. No, I'll probably set it up at some point later when I start making static utility methods. I might move this to a utility method. So what I can do is say, public static void blah, and then I can call that from anywhere by saying space measure dot blah, which is cool, but I'm not going to do it right now. What I'm going to do is get distance between transforms. T1, oh, transform. So I want to pass in these two transforms. Okay, I also need to make this return float. I'm just going to use tree.distance d1 position to the world position, t2 position. Alright, so I'm only updating this value, only running this distance method, which is slow, maybe not in the grand scheme of things, but slow enough to optimize out. I'm only going to run that when I need to, when it's actually changing. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is pop in a space here, GUI layout dot space. Not, does that take a, no, so let's make it a 30 pixel space. You'd think being pixels it would be an integer. Well, okay. And now GUI layout dot label distance meters. Is that? That's totally not a thing unless it. Right. So what's the get distance in transforms? Not all pair pass random value. That is completely true. Yeah, and if when I do move this to a static method, I'll have to do null reference checks for these before I do this. Otherwise, I'll get a null reference exception. But for now, I can safely. I know that they're not going to be null. So I've got this check here, so not too concerned about that for now. All right, so our space measure thing is updated. What I can do now, theoretically, is grab this cube, drop it into here, and grab this sucker, drop it into there, and the distance is 560.7335 meters. That's crap. I'm gonna get rid of that. Instead, do that. Alright, that's a lot nicer. Okay. Reduce that a bit too. And you'd see here if I went in here and cleared one of them out, it would tell me that transforms need to be assigned to both transform field for measurement. But I don't care. That's cool. So that's a quick little way of making a useful window. Yeah, obviously you can see the possibilities there. Let's quickly open this up, have a look at scripting reference, type in pick handle utility pick game object. Alright, I haven't used this before. I'm going to assume it totally works exactly how I want. And alright. Okay, how are we going to format this window now? Put a button at the end there. So, okay, let's use GUI layout dot begin horizontal and GUI layout dot end horizontal. Now anything in between these two will be laid out side by side horizontally. So what I want to do is put in picking transform 1 equals false, picking transform 2 equals false, picking transform 1 equals QE dot, well, no, if QE layout dot button pick is true, and disable that one if we were currently picking that one. So I want to do the same sort of thing here, except vice versa. Alright, so now let's jump down to here, picking transforms. If picking transform 1 equals handles dot, handles utility, was it? Handles utility pick game object okay, I don't really want to do it this way. What I need to do is an on scene view, then get the event, get the mouse button, left mouse button. If this ball was true when I was left clicked in the scene view, then do the pick. I don't really care about that right now, so I'm going to leave it out. And just to avoid confusion for myself, I'm going to remove these two and just leave it as is. Got a couple of warnings about this sort of thing. Problem solved. Always go back and update it later, but it's not an issue right now. So the point in that was, if we backtrack, I wanted to know how far away that was. I thought, yeah, that's about the distance I'll see things from. And you'll see here this Z fighting issue is because I focused on a cube. So the scene camera's clip planes are set according to the size of the bounds of the object frame selected. If I was instead up here but selected on something like that, you'll see the clip planes do not introduce that Z fighting tidbit. Okay, so what I want to do now is adjust my shadow settings. Because most of this won't be static, can't use light maps for shadows, and obviously I'm going to be on the if I go on the iPad, you know, shadows and things are probably not that feasible either. So let's just set this to 800, which is massive, and actually put shadows on so we actually see something. Getting, well, yeah, there is that. I mean, these things can be sort of tweaked, changing the bias and stuff like that. I'm not overly concerned right now, just tweak it a bit. Yeah, these sort of adjusting that stuff is often better for later in the project when, you know, this final sort of scenes are set up and you can adjust your settings accordingly. There's no right answer. It really depends on what you're doing, and that's a good thing about Unity is, you know, they provide things and they give enough options to sort of tweak it as you need. It would be nice to have more options, and I think they recognise that too, and they're working towards giving more flexible, more power to the user, while also maintaining ease of use. So that looks pretty cool. Pretty happy with that. Probably won't go too much further with this video. Obviously, as soon as the video stops, I stop. every step of the way I'm going to be recording the process and putting the video up. So I'll probably ramble less as time goes on, and hopefully work faster, so that this isn't, doesn't require 1,000 hard drives to store the video in its completion total. Okay. Do we want to get something quickly going here? Possibly want to write some scripts. We've worked on some visual stuff, we've worked on a few basic things, haven't really got into the nitty-gritty gameplay stuff. Resources, game prefabs, characters. How about let's make new folder for weapons, and it's going to be the main part of the game, to be honest. Just having the weapons on the platforms, firing from those, interacting with those. The idea at the moment is that you'll be in a view like this, and you'll whip the camera around from one weapon to another, seeing sort of what it can hit, and then you'll make your choice as to which weapon you're going to fire, and you'll then go into a couple of aiming modes, I guess. You'll go up here and sort of choose which direction on this sort of plane to fire at. So you can shoot this way, shoot that way, shoot directly forward, and then probably shoot down to this sort of view, which you might be familiar with, and determine the power, so you can determine sort of the final trajectory of the bullet. And then I'm thinking, once you actually fire, it'll just whip around and the camera will follow your big boulder and whatever, and it'll probably stop around this point. Boom, smash, crash, little leprechaun dudes diving off in a very PG, non-suicide way. So we're gonna need some nice camera system, nice lerping, slurping around. Be able to change cameras on the fly quickly. Be able to go from a camera up here down to a camera down there. I wanted to just do it in a nice transition, not in a snap sort of way. Not disable this camera, enable this camera crap. I want it to be nice, but fast, but smooth. So not any sort of linear interpolation. I want it to be a have some sort of curve to it. So it starts off slow, gets fast, and then slow. So we'll go through the process of doing all of that. End up with some nice camera scripts. Obviously, going to need to be able to do all that aiming, do all the shooting. So we're going to have different bullets, we'll call them. So big boulders, big rocks, maybe shooting off a bunch of stuff. A sack of rocks, or chuck up half a dozen smaller rocks in a catapult and shoot that off. The idea being, each weapon has its own ammo type and its own firing style and power, and you sort of have to pick which one to use in which situation accordingly, so that you can destroy the blocks, blocking out the goal. I guess the assumption is that at this stage there'll be a pot of gold or a chest of gold that you're after. Hit that, explodes in a fountain of gold coins, and that's when you win the level. Celebration time, gold coins going everywhere. Up pops the thing. You won. You're awesome. You're the greatest dwarf guy ever. Legend at 4 feet sort of thing, or 10,000 at 4 feet maybe in this case. Anyway, so not going to get too far into that today. I think the next one I'll get into building the weapons, building the camera scripts, allowing you to whip around from platform to platform. So that'll be pretty cool. So my goal with this is to get to a prototype stage, a playable alpha, I guess, in many ways, pretty quickly. So art assets, will come in time, and we've already got this pretty slick ass little rock here. A lot of things to think about in the graphical side there. I really want to push the graphics, not in terms of maybe number of triangles or the most crazy post-processing effects, but just in terms of clever stuff. If you got the camera here, you want to see clouds moving. So whether the clouds are just let's just see what we can do here for a moment. Let's just humour me. Okay, alright. That totally looks like a cloud. Am I right? Am I right? Two options. Yeah, this is going to be a cloud, alright. Alright, so I've never said that I'm an artist. This is supposed to be a cloud. Totally looks like a pretty slick cloud if you're me, and have, I don't know, whatever I'm seeing is a cloud. Obviously everyone else in the world is seeing not a cloud. That's fine, I don't mind. So yeah, so let's just say we had a whole bunch of these scattered around. I don't know how that's gonna look. Probably pretty crappy, but just do it. It's good to get an idea of how stuff will look. I normally have editor windows. I haven't got anything in here yet for just doing stuff like copying stuff and placing it randomly around an area, so that's quite useful. So that's actually, yeah, that actually looks pretty sweet. I'm pretty happy with that. I think we could ship this. Yeah, so I mean, I think that sort of style for clouds might even work. Shadow. But I think we need probably something that will be at this sort of level and move around and sort of come through as you're playing in this view. Yeah, not just be above the clouds, have clouds around you, but be in the clouds, not obscuring gameplay. Not have it get in the way of the camera or anything like that. But I think that'll be quite cool. I'm going to leave these clouds here for now. I wonder, and this is again, Unity, what can it do in 3.5? Can I do this? Yes, but that's going to rename the children. No, it hasn't. Well, that's freaking cool. Alright, that's cool. I'm pretty happy with Unity right now. Make an empty game object called clouds. Let's send it out of position. Obviously these clouds placeholder, and if you'd notice when I made it, totally have the clouds offset from the pivot, which is, I feel dirty right now. Alright, so I guess you can start to see the art style, start to get an idea of what it's going to look like. It's going to be, sort of cartoony, sort of fun, but yeah, these dwarves are going to be pretty determined, pretty keen. I'm going to have lots of cool sound effects, cool voice stuff. Maybe I'll be able to crowdsource a bit of that if anyone's interested in what we're doing. And I really hope that I can develop something here that with these videos that is useful to people. I mean, I don't know if there's any videos out there showing development of a game from start to finish. I mean, this isn't besides game dev stuff, weekend, a couple day game stuff. This is going to be a while. This is not going to be done too quickly. We're going to polish this up. We're going to try and get this done in a reasonable time frame, but not rush it. I want this to be a really polished game. I want this to be something that people look at and say that's friggin' cool. And there's a video here showing how it was done. So this should be hopefully a good learning tool for a lot of new programmers or guys looking at Unity for the first time. And I've been using Unity for a whole bunch of years. I'm a lead programmer by day of a team of programmers working on some big stuff. I have different concerns than what I'll be going on about in this video. Most people don't care about this. I care about that. That's the sort of stuff I have to worry about. So there might be stuff for even seasoned guys. They might pick up something they haven't thought about before. I do a lot of optimization in my scripts as I write them. I do a lot of caching of variables, and hopefully people can pick up something there as well. And it might even be a way of learning programming, to be honest. Maybe watching someone write a whole bunch of stuff, if you can pause the video and just figure out what the hell's going on, and I'll try to discuss it as I go. In fact, let's spend the next few minutes writing a quick script here. Let's just make one. We're going to need at some point some scripts for moving stuff around, so let's actually make another object script. Let's call it translate over time. It's just basic description of what it's going to do. So this is going to excuse me. I'm going to do a public vector 3. Translation per second. Vector 3 dot move forward. Alright, so by default it's going to move the transform 1 meter in the positive Z direction. So I'll do a couple of things here. So I'm going to put in another public variable for whether it's world or local space. I'm going to default it to world space, and I'll make a private variable here to cache the transform. One thing that most people I've seen in sort of scripts online, they don't take into account, even though I believe Unity actually mention it in their sort of scripting reference and things like that. Doing this, whatever, that is essentially the same as, unless Unity's changed what they're doing at all, which I don't think they have so far. Same as that, and that's not super fast. So you don't want to do that very often. So doing it once and then just caching the variable is a good way to okay. It's a good way to just speed things up. If you had thousands and thousands and thousands of these things, and look at the profile, you'd see, wait a minute, what's this get component that's happening thousands of times every frame and takes milliseconds and milliseconds. At the end of the day, a few milliseconds can count for quite a bit. I'll do it as part of this project. I'll go through the profiler and just find the things that are slowest and optimize. But I do that as I go. But there'll be things that I miss or things that I optimize but could be optimized further, and that'll come later in the project as well. So what we're going to do here is pass in translation per second. We're going to multiply that by time.delta time. Now, if anyone isn't sure what I'm doing here, essentially this means that it will work at any frame rate. So delta time is the time difference between the previous frame and the current frame. So over 1 second, delta time will add up to 1. So by multiplying this by delta time, let's say there's 10 frames per second, delta time will be 0.1, so I'm multiplying this by 10% of its value. So if I do that 10 times in 1 second, it ends up being the full amount in 1 second. That's actually much more eloquent than I expected it to be. Okay, so I'm going to put in a ternary sort of little equation here. Local space so if local space is true, use space self, otherwise use space world. Just get rid of some of these brackets, probably unnecessary. Same issue again as always. Yeah, I think I will probably try changing the template. Alright. And because of Unity 3.5's awesomeness, I can add this script to all those clouds at the same time. Thanks, Unity. In fact, let's go in here and make a environment prefabs, sure, cloud. And okay, I don't have I'd really like an editor script right now to replace these with that prefab. I don't have it. I'm not going to add it or write it right now. We're just going to deal with it. Hit play. Okay, so those clouds are totally moving at 1 meter per second in the positive Z direction, which is away from the camera. And that's super cool. What I'll do is jump into the time here, and I can modify time scale, and you can see that, hey, if it's running 56 times faster, they totally look like they're moving fast. So if they were prefabs, which they're not, but they will be, it'd be a lot easier. I could just jump in here and change this value for clouds. What I can also do, which may or may not be necessary, is, you know, use a global wind value or something, a wind velocity vector that they utilize, which for this might not be necessary. It might also be possible, I'm not sure, I haven't really looked into, you know, Unity at one point, probably still now, has had some sort of wind zone, which I'm not really, I believe it's used for trees or something. I'm not really sure what its purpose is, but hey, for this it could be totally worth doing. And I could, you know, chuck a wind zone in and have clouds reference a wind zone for their velocity vector. Mode, directional, spherical. Alright, interesting. So yeah, I mean, that might be what I'll end up doing. Alright, so that's going to do it for this video. I think it's around the 2-hour mark now, which that is certainly enough for me for this first video. There might be videos that go for, you know, 30 minutes and I focus on a specific topic. That's sort of one of my plans, is to make videos that don't just ramble on about, you know, all sorts of stuff. Well, you know, obviously as things come up and we're looking at the future, you know, there'll be a, you know, we're going to do weapons and camera stuff next time. Maybe I'll do a video of just camera stuff for an hour, and then that will be a specific video on that topic, which will be useful, and you don't have to sit through me rambling about random stuff or making things you don't care about and doing things that aren't interesting. But there will still be, you know, I'm going to need to do big long stretches of boring code or trial and error, or, you know, and those might be 4-hour videos or 5-hour videos, 6-hour videos. You know, hopefully I don't lose anything across along the way. That's always, you know, an issue. Of, you know, potentially the computer could crash or something goes wrong in the recording and I lose something. I'll try to keep backups of the project at each step, and I, you know, may or may not. If it's a short video, maybe I'll just redo what I did, and if I lose a lot, then, you know, I'll deal with that when it comes along. Try not to. Hopefully it doesn't happen. I'm going to try and hit the stop button on the 2-hour mark exactly, which will mean you'll see if I've cut anything out or done anything, because it won't be 2 hours long. But I'm trying to try to keep it very very true, not modify anything, and eventually we'll have a video detailing the process start to finish, everything. Alright, that's 2 hours and 5 seconds. Closing thoughts. I'm not sure where this is going yet. I'm going to place this on the Unity forum and you know, probably a few other places, game dev blogs and that sort of thing. I we'll put this on the Southeast Games website, I suppose. Not sure what video provider. YouTube might not be possible. I'm not sure about length things. Vimeo. Not sure at this stage. I'll sort that all out as soon as possible. As soon as I start posting this stuff, you know, I'll try to make sure it's very professional and timely and all that. So that's sorted. So, you know, hopefully you can. Yeah, keep tuned. I'd see this as sort of you know, chuck it on your second monitor or something, or you know, and just listen to it in the background while you do your own thing. And you know, if anything sounds like it's piquing your interest, then pay attention. Otherwise, you know, don't. Or if you're trying to learn something or trying to rip me off, then totally just, you know, do so. I don't really care. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So totally. Let me know if anything's weird, wrong, the video looks crap, frame rate issues, if I ramble too much, if you want me to talk about something specific, if you have any issues with the product we're making, or you know, any suggestions, let me know, one way or another. I'll see it. Alright, thanks a lot.